Thank you so much for being here with us today and for the highly customized video for our CU-MEDi student. So I'm hoping I have told the student that it's okay to ask you themselves. I think it would be nice for them to have that opportunity, if that would be okay with you.
Yeah, so this is rather unusual and awkward medium. I'm not very comfortable teaching like this, but we make the best of it. And I'd just like to invite you all to feel this is very informal chat, and that feel free to ask anything and don't worry about saying the wrong thing, or I like to hear challenging questions, and so I don't expect everyone to agree with me, and I quite like it if people disagree with me more than I do when people agree with me. So if there is anything that you like to bring up, please feel free to do so.
Thank you. There definitely was some people already asked that they're afraid of asking the wrong question. So
no, there's no wrong question today. Okay, it's just for today.
Thank you. And I also asked them if they have more trouble formulating their thought in English, then they can ask in Thai also.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Anyone have question? Please raise your hand. This is your chance. I can ask question, but then it won't really help you as much as you help ask yourself. Mm-hmm. So I can start off when they are warming up. I think there are a lot. I was reading about a lot of students are concerned that they're not going to be a good enough doctors, that they are not smart enough, not can't remember well enough, and how can they be good doctor? Can you please help them?
Yeah, well, I think this is feeds into a larger concern that everyone has, not only medical students, that in our life we're not going to be good enough. We're not good enough sons or daughters or brothers or sisters. We're not going to be good enough parents. We're not going to be good enough spouses. This constant fear that we're not going to measure up, that we're not good enough. But the question is, well, what's your standard? Who are you measuring yourself against? And we see in so many areas of life today how social media has made the standards that we measure ourselves against unrealistic and a cause of a lot of unnecessary suffering. So I think that recognizing that way of looking at things, that not being good enough, you'll never get a satisfactory answer to that. There's no point at which you say, now I'm good enough. Or if you do, maybe that's not so wise either, because certainly in Buddhism, but not exclusively in Buddhism, we talk about lifetime learning and constantly trying to develop oneself, not only in new fields that one has not yet explored, but in things that you're familiar with and that you feel quite capable in. But it's more, I feel, a matter of finding joy and just finding the pleasure and the joy of learning and growing and developing, whether it's as a human being generally or as a medical student or as a doctor. And that sense of growth and maturation and learning from experience, I think this is more of the things that can give us a sense of a refuge or a sense of contentment in our life. The sense that, I'm learning. If I compare myself with 6 months ago or a year ago or 5 years ago, I've learned so much. Maybe I think as you get older, you realize that often learn through the difficult, more unpleasant things more deeply than you do through the pleasant things. But my simple answer is don't think like that. It's not a very wise way of thinking, but thinking, well, what are my strengths and weaknesses right now? Short term, long term, how can I gradually work to reduce the weak points and to capitalize upon, to develop further the strong points. I think that, again, I would say that there's no kind of fixed checklist for what makes a good doctor. You're not going to be able to cover all the bases and be like the perfect doctor. We'll all have different strengths, and working as a group, then you help each other out. If you avoid a competitive atmosphere in a hospital or whatever, and you realize, you've all got your blind spots or your weak points, and you help each other out, and you encourage and help other people to develop their strong points. So it's not just you alone having to on this really intimidating task of trying to make yourself a good enough doctor, but it's you and your teachers and your friends and colleagues helping each other. So it doesn't have to be such a lonely and difficult path, I don't think.
Thank you. So there is the question. There's someone said there's a student asking, I find it difficult to find the right balance between thinking I'm not good enough and I'm okay, let's enjoy this experience. So maybe you can advise on how to adjust the thought for that.
From a Buddhist educational perspective, would say that not enough attention is given to what in sort of modern technical term is called metacognition, or learning about thinking or the process of thinking, and too much emphasis on the content of thinking. So to be a good thinker means, to me, means that you know when not to think, when is the time to think, when is the time not to think, and you don't have to think. You're not compelled to think when you don't need to think. And you are able to choose the kinds of thinking which are appropriate to a situation. So there's a great art to thinking, and part of it is learning the space around thinking, which is accessible through various kinds of spiritual techniques, most notably meditation, where you are able to experience your mind as very clear and bright and sharp, but without thinking in it. And if you're, most of you, I'm sure, pretty smart people with intellectual bent, that the danger with that is you tend to identify with thinking very much, and you think, this is who you are. I am my thinking. What makes me special, what makes me stand out from other people is my brain. So you tend to really grasp onto thinking and feel fear of losing your thinking because it's losing who you are. And that's not something that you can just stop doing as an act of will. It comes about through practice of mindfulness and meditation and accustoming yourself to non-thinking states of mind. When you can do that, then the kind of insight you have is that thoughts, whether they are negative, positive thoughts, negative thoughts, angry thoughts, sad, depressed thoughts, they are all events. They are processes. They are things that arise and pass away. in the mind. And one of the classic analogies or similes is to compare the mind to the sky and all the mental states, the thoughts, emotions, and so on, as like clouds that pass through the sky. And we can see there is a clear distinction between the sky and the clouds. And we can make a similar distinction between our mind and thoughts. And so when thoughts of inadequacy, of jealousy, of disillusionment, or whatever they may be, positive or negative, they are experienced as events in the mind rather than who I am. This is who I am. This belongs to me, this thought, that we don't have to feel that I am a good person because I have a good thought in my mind, or I'm a bad person because I have a bad thought in my mind, or I'm hopeless because I have hopeless thoughts in my mind, or I'm excellent, I'm brilliant because I have brilliant thoughts in my mind. This is just stuff. This is just things passing through the mind. And I think this is a really crucial change in the way that you look at your own inner world, beginning to see things in terms of conditioned events arising and passing away in a stream, rather than things and states of mind that represent who you are on an eternal basis. So it's a matter of getting some new perspective on your thinking, whether it's the thinking of I'm not good enough, or sometimes alternating with thoughts, yes, I am good enough, and going backwards and forwards, but you're still in that whirlpool, you're still caught up in that, and you have to learn to be able to stand back from that and get a fresher perspective on it.
Thank you so much. But what if you really liked when you feel good and like, wow, I'm great, I'm so smart, but then I don't like it when I actually think that I'm dumb?
Yeah, I mean, it's not taking a kind of a moralistic view. You shouldn't get carried away and you should be like this, because that whole approach to spiritual religious life is, how you should be and how you shouldn't be, is a complete disaster. But as a Buddhist, we're saying, well, what's going on right now? And let's look at the connection. Let's look at the relationship between feelings up and feeling down, or feeling excited and feeling bored. And from my observation, at least, that they are very closely related, that the more you crave excitement, then the more you suffer through boredom. So boredom is like the shadow of excitement. And the idea that you can have just excitement and no boredom, I don't think nature will ever give you that. If you can, that would be kind of magic, wouldn't it? If you can only feel positive and excited and happy all the time and never miserable. But that it doesn't work like that, that they condition each other. And this is apparent in so many areas of life. It's like praise and blame. The more you love people praising you, the more painful you find it when people criticize you. And if you want to let go of the pain of being criticized, you have to be brave enough to let go of some of the pleasure of being praised. You say, yeah, praise is praise. It's nice, but it's just that. It's nothing more than that. And and criticism is just criticism. They're part of the world we live in.
Thank you. There's also another question on how do we start finding happiness internally?
Well, I have an analogy. It's a nice story about the great sculptor Michelangelo. I don't know if anyone's been fortunate enough to ever go to Italy and see any of his great masterpieces. But one is a sculpture of a prancing horse, and it's quite remarkable sculpture. And someone asked him, how is it possible that you start off with this huge lump of rock, and from that lump of rock, you are able to create a horse that looks so realistic? And so Michelangelo says, well, I just chip away all the non-horse bits of the rock. So it's like the horse is there within the rock, and I just have to get rid of everything else, which is not the horse. And with inner peace or inner happiness, it's not something that you gain. It's not like something you have to get, but you have to be very observant of all the ways in which you create unhappiness for yourselves, and you don't have to. So much of our unhappiness in life is self-inflicted because we've never really observed and learned about how our mind works. And we've never learned how our mind becomes happy, how it becomes sad, how to protect the mind, how to cultivate the mind. These basic principles of mental hygiene are by most people completely ignored. And so it's not any surprise how poor people's mental health is these days. And I think, I think it's clear, isn't it, how much illness, physical illness is psychosomatic, is affected by mental states, how mental states affect the immune system, for instance. And so I think it is a very important area for doctors to be more informed about the relationship between the mind and mental states and physical health. Because at the end of the day, we can't really separate mind and body, in any real measurable way, I think.
กับนมัสการพระอาจารย์นะครับขออนุญาต I would like to ask that could you please elaborate more about meditation and in meditation in our life and how meditation can improve our learning process and how can we apply them in everyday life as a medical student ครับ
Yes, well, if I can give kind of like big picture, this is something that I did touch on in the short talk. So the Buddhist analysis is that the major cause of suffering in human life are what we call defilement or giled, or sort of negative mental states, and that the main and most important cause of inner happiness is what we can call, maybe in a more kind of neutral way, positive mental states. So that if we accept that basic premise of the Buddhist argument, then we are left with four challenges. Firstly, if defilement, if negative mental states are in fact the main cause of human suffering or mental suffering, how can we prevent them from arising in our mind? That would be the first challenge. The second challenge is, given that we're unlikely to be 100% successful in that first effort, how do we abandon, how do we let go of negative mental states that have already arisen in our mind? So the second part of the premise is the relationship between positive mental states and happiness. So that leads us also to two challenges. How do we bring into the mind positive mental states that are not yet present? And fourthly, how do we cultivate those that have already arisen and bring them to maturity? So if we take these as like four life challenges, then Buddhist meditation techniques are the activity which is specifically devised, specifically designed to train in those dealing with those four challenges. So an initial meditation technique would consist of focusing on a particular object, let's say the breath, the breathing sensation. And so the first challenge would be, how can I focus on my breathing in such a way that negative mental states cannot enter my mind? Or if negative mental states do enter my mind, how can I let go of them while focusing on the breath? Now, in order to focus on the breath in the appropriate way, we need to call upon many positive mental states of patience, effort, mindfulness, clarity of mind, contentment. So many mental states have to be present in the mind for the meditation to develop well. So a meditation practice is not a Buddhist meditation practice. Is not relaxation. In fact, it's finding the harmony or the middle way, balance between effort and relaxation. You know, in most of us, we know what it is to be really hardworking and diligent and putting effort into something, and we know what it is to relax. But they tend to be very different mental states. But in meditation, you're developing this skill to be able to put forth consistent effort, but without abandoning relaxation. And in meditation, you have a very efficient feedback system, because if you put too much effort, you try too hard in meditation, and you lack relaxation, you'll get stressed and your mind won't become calm. But if you're too relaxed and you lack effort, you'll become sleepy. So the whether or not your mind is agitated or sleepy is your feedback system, which is telling you whether you're applying the appropriate amount of effort at any one moment. So the actual, although in Thai we say tam samadhi, you know, it's something you do. But in fact, the actual effort is to sustain mindfulness for a period of time. So when mindfulness becomes stabilized and continuous, then certain changes take place in the mind. There's a sense of focus, of stability, of clarity, of joy in the mind, of peace in the mind. These are all states that tell us we are entered the state of samadhi. So the state of samadhi is important, not in itself, but because it provides the necessary foundation for more subtle and profound investigation of the nature of body and mind in the present moment. Now, in daily life, a daily meditation practice is most usefully carried out early in the morning. Many people tend to meditate before they go to bed, but it's just it is a good way of letting go of tension and helping to sleep better. But its more profound effects are not really experienced. But when you have daily early morning meditation practice, it's easier to see the effects that it has on your daily life, on your daily mental state, on the amount of patience you have, the clarity of mind, the presence of mind, the energy, the kindness. You begin to see that many positive mental states start to appear in the mind much more naturally, flowing from the daily meditation practice. And so that is a important motivating factor. But what we really want is an unbroken stream of mindfulness throughout our waking hours. So in Buddhist terminology, we talk about formal meditation and informal. So formal means the exercises of sitting with your eyes closed or walking up and down. But they are formal because those are exercises in which we eliminate as far as possible all the disturbing influences. We close our eyes, we're in a quiet place. There's not a lot going on early in the morning, particularly, and it enables us to focus on our meditation to the exclusion of everything else. But in daily life, we don't have that kind of that kind of control. But what we want to do is to be able to sustain that kind of presence of mind throughout the day. So it means being with what you're doing moment by moment. So learning this present moment awareness and being able to settle back into it or be comfortable in it, and not to be pulled around by thoughts of agitation and fears and anxieties and insecurities and likes and dislikes, and so many of the mental states that undermine our capacity to fulfill our responsibilities well. So I think that the motivation for meditation can also come from observing just how much time is wasted in daily life, how many mistakes are made through being stressed out, through lacking mindfulness and clear comprehension, how much sometimes we feel we're really lacking in the resources to deal, inner resources to deal with the challenges that we face. And even if we're in a well-equipped hospital and all the external resources are available, what's most important and what we really need is the inner resources. And I would say that a daily meditation practice is a very efficient, effective way of cultivating your inner resources to deal with all the stresses and strains of your daily life.
สวัสดีค่ะ Hi. So I know that in medical school setting there are some certain approach in practicing like palliative care or taking care of patients at the end stage of life. But I would like to learn more from like a different perspective from you. If you would have like any suggestions for us as medical students on how to like take care or how to talk to them at the end stage of their life.
Yes, of course. Although I must say that most of the leaders of the palliative care movement in Thailand, most of the doctors have been very influenced by Buddhist teachings because there's a lot of interest in this in Buddhist circles. I would say that just a few points is that to make would be to try to put the person's mind at rest about anything that they're particularly worried about, whether it's conflicts with other people or worries about money and property and inheritances and so on, and for the family members to be able to put their mind at rest so they're not spending their last days worrying about these kinds of matters. I think that it's very important that the family members also have clear consensus and agreement about what happens at the end of life in terms of resuscitation and living wills are now becoming much more accepted, and I think many people in Thailand now are starting to take an interest in laying down some guidelines for how they would like to be treated and looked after at the end of their life. I think that one of the specifically Buddhist techniques that I teach and at the very end of life is to encourage people to recollect the things that they're most proud of in their life, the good things that they're most proud of in life, because you want someone to be reaching the end of their life in the most calm and peaceful way possible. But if you teach most meditation techniques to someone who's never meditated before, it's unrealistic. They're not really going to be able to get much from it. But one thing that we all do have, everyone, whether you're consider yourself religious or not, is you have memories of good things that you're really proud of in your life. And that's an inner resource that you have. We call it inner treasure in Buddhism. And so if the family member sits with that person and encourages them to recollect things in their life that they, the kind of thing you say, well, whatever happens in my life, at least I've done this, and at least I feel proud of this. And then you encourage them to think about those events and how they felt in particular. And then that sense of joy and pride, wholesome pride, can be the meditation object for that person. So they don't have to be looking at their breath or thinking of a special word, but taking a positive emotion, which is systematically cultivated through memory, as a refuge that can help them through the pain or the fear of the last part of their life. They need it. In Buddhist families, then often the family will come around if they're at home or in the evening, and sit with them and maybe do the evening chanting together or even meditate together. I think it's very important that families are in harmony and that they don't come into the room where the person, the elderly person, is going to pass away, and they're full of resistance and anger at what's going on, or they're very upset with something, because even if the person who's going to pass away has their eyes closed, it's usually their ears that are the last sense to go, and they can often pick up on what's being said and pick up on the emotions of people in the room around them. So it's an important time for all family members to be coming to terms with this separation and being at peace with it, and being able to allow that person to pass away. I visited people on their deathbed, and I felt that they were ready to go a long time, but they were like Grengjai of their family. They didn't want to upset their family members. So it's kind of ironic and rather sad that the family members' attachment and unwillingness to accept the inevitability of death can sometimes cause that person who is ready to leave this world feel unable to do so. So yeah, those are one or two. It's a big topic, isn't it? But one or two thoughts that I share with you today.
Thank you, Ka.
Thank you for that answer. It was very useful. So my question is gonna take you back in time a little bit when you were our age. I was just wondering what draws you to Buddhism, because it's like I have I guess you could call it privilege to have friends from across all religion, right? Christianity, Islam, Hinduism. And we're just like, we like discussing a lot on, why you choose to practice certain religions. And I think like the conclusion I've reached is that no one has the answer, the good enough answer. But a lot of the common themes were the promise of like the afterlife, right? If you believe in, God, and then your promise a good afterlife. But then I contrast that to Buddhism. This is just my very biased view. It's actually a rather depressing religion because of, how we keep going to be reincarnated again and again. So I was just curious as to why someone would want to explore Buddhism as an option for religious practice. And what is your, what were you looking for when you choose to go down this path when you were young?
Well, I grew up in England, and I felt profound disconnection from Christianity. It didn't make any sense to me at all. As a child, I had asthma throughout my childhood, so I missed school a lot, and I was very introspective, and I read a lot of books, and I just couldn't accept the logic and of Christianity. It didn't make sense to me at all, and so I thought, well, that's all right. I don't need religion. But in my teenage years, I started to have really big questions, and my questions weren't about afterlife. My questions is, why is the world like this? Why is there so much suffering in the world? Why is there so much injustice? Does it have to be like this? And if it doesn't have to be like this, if it can be better than this, what is the responsibility of each human being to try to make it better than it is? And this was bound up with really big questions. What's the best way to live your life as a human being? Or is that even like a reasonable question? We can make value judgments between, say, a very consumer object, let's say a very cheapest kind of car and the most expensive kind of luxury car. And we say, oh, luxury car has better suspension, it's faster, it looks more beautiful, it's more comfortable, etc., etc. So we have various criteria. But what would be the criteria of a good human life? And say this human life is a superior human life. And that was, when I was in my teens, that was a big question. And so I read a lot, and I never thought this was anything to do with religion at all. Quite the opposite. But then I came across teachings of Buddhism eventually, and to me, it just made so much sense. And the Buddha saying that, all the problems of human beings boil down to the fact that we don't really understand ourselves. We don't understand the human condition. We don't understand the world we live in. It's a matter of ignorance, and that there is a path. There is a systematic path to self-discovery and understanding, which also leads to great happiness and the ability to help others. And that the greatest thing that you can do in life is learn how to free yourself from greed, hatred, delusion, all the root causes of human suffering, and share that knowledge with others. So that for me was what really set me out on the path of Buddhism. So I felt that I don't want to be criticizing other religious traditions. So from my superficial understanding, I felt that religions were telling you how you should believe, how you should be, and telling you off because you're not who you should be. And then you say, okay, well, how do I get from where I am now to where you want me to be? And I could never find any really clear-cut instructions for how to, day by day, moment by moment, how to transform myself from who I was to who all the religions in the world were telling me I should be. And then I found in Buddhism just this so practical, down-to-earth, like a instruction engineering manual for making really, really radical transformational changes in conduct, in emotional life, in spiritual life. And it was that practical aspect to it which really pulled me in at the end, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you. That was an amazing answer. Yeah. I'll let someone ask before I ask more.
Yeah, actually that was a really good question.
I'm actually very nervous asking this question because I was born and raised a Catholic, but I kind of had the same kind of thought that I do not understand a lot of stuff that was taught to me and how I was raised. But instead of going into Buddhism, I became an atheist. But then at the same time, people keep telling me that as an atheist, you don't have a core and you're not going to understand a lot of people in terms of their core values. Basically, people keep telling me that I won't be a good person. So I just want to know what other people feel and think about this, because I don't understand why would people be judging me that I'm not a good person as an atheist.
Well, I mean, this is part of the dialogue, within Western cultures, American culture in particular, and part of the kind of, if I may use the word, propaganda of theistic religion, is that all morality is derived from God. So if you don't believe in God, you have no root for your morality, and so you can't be truly moral unless you believe in God, or at least you believe in their particular version of God, because you can believe in other versions of God, and that doesn't count either. So it's not so clear cut. But this was one of the reasons, as I say, as a child, that I could never really relate to this, because I used to love to read about other countries around the world and other cultures, and so we're saying, what, there are millions and millions and millions of people in the world, who don't believe in God or don't believe in your particular God. Are you really saying that you're more moral than they are? You're better than they are, really? And if you look at the history of Western colonialism and its connections with evangelical movements, it's not very inspiring to my view. But to put that sort of criticism aside, I would say that if you're looking at your mind and you're learning from your experience, you can. I don't see why you have to believe in God to know this is what selfishness is like. This is what unselfishness is like. This is what generosity is like. This is what kindness is like. This is what compassion is like. This is what jealousy. The more you learn about life, the more you learn about mental states, the more you learn about yourself, the more you learn about other people. I can't see the necessary connection to belief in a particular religious system. I think for me, it's far more a matter of observation and empathy and being able to put your own views and opinions and prejudices aside and open up to someone fully in the present moment and really listen and really hear who they are and where they're coming from. And sometimes having a set of beliefs actually is an obstacle to that, because it's very difficult to avoid being judgmental and I'm right and you're wrong. And if you just changed your ideas and thought like me, you'd be a lot better off. But atheist, the word itself is kind of, it's starting off from there is God, and then there are people who don't believe in him. So, you're already sort of accepted the premise of a God before you even start discussing the matter. So, I mean, Buddhists are atheists. I'm quite happy to say I'm an atheist, but I'm a very devout Buddhist as well. But there are so many really wonderful people who live within Catholic tradition and find a way of navigating between within those particular ways of looking at life. So I'm not here to try to say Buddhism is number one or anything like that. It works for me, but I would, on this specific point, disagree with the idea that morality and good qualities in the human heart have to be rooted in a belief in a particular religious dogma.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate everything you said today, and it has really helped me with like the stress that I'm feeling currently as a medical student. But I just wanted to ask a little bit about like some principles, because I think for me, it's really important for me like I just really want to find out like what is like the truth of like what is actually real, like what I should believe based on like finding the objective truth. Because I've been with a lot of people who say that like, oh yeah, just do what works for you, like there's it's possible that everything is true because what's right is relative to what you feel or what you believe. But practically speaking, like if all the religions are true, like the facts contradict each other, right? So they cannot all be true at the same time. So I feel like there must be an objective truth, and like how you find out, whether you find out like what that is like a different story. But like so like in all aspects, whenever someone talks about something, I want to like find out also not just what works practically, but like whether it makes sense into the details, because I'm kind of like detail oriented as well. So like when you say that you choose Buddhism because it works, it's like you've discovered many truths, or like how it works with you. When Buddhism also has these like very detailed set of beliefs, like about reincarnation or about certain things. I wonder if you also believe in that, and like do you think it's important to like prove whether it's true reincarnation or like whatever facts they talk about?
Okay, that's just a lot packed into that question. So I maybe sort of unpick it a little bit. And first of all, I think, one of the things that I've really observed over the past many years is that many people in Thailand these days, educated people, see Buddhism through Western eyes, and through Western concepts, and through non-Buddhist ways of thinking about life. And so if we look at the family of religions that grew up in the Middle East, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and then we call these the monotheistic traditions, but we can also say they are essentially belief systems. It's important, you have to accept certain dogmas, certain beliefs which are not provable. You have to take them. You just have to believe in them. If you can't believe in the Christian dogmas, well, at the end of the day, you can't be a Christian. If you can't believe in Muslim dogmas, you can't be a Muslim. And as you say, they're mutually contradictory. They can either one can be right and one can be wrong, or else they're both wrong, but they can't both be right. But the problem is with the prestige and the influence of Western scholarship and Western culture, then Buddhism is considered to be a belief system, because religion means belief system. But Buddhism is a different kind of religion. It is essentially an education system. So this is a very important distinction to make: religion as belief system and religion as education system. Now, so in Buddhism, we don't have dogmas that you have to believe in the same way. Now, let's take the one that's usually referred to, like reincarnation or rebirth. Now, the Buddha told us that we should. There's a technical term in Pali, but I'll explain it. It's called anurak satya. So you anurak the truth, or satya, and you do that by, you don't claim to know something that you only believe. So in Buddhist teaching, it's very important to make a distinction. What do I actually know as a direct experience, and what do I believe? So you can believe in something, but you should never forget that you don't actually know. So if someone is to say, oh, you're a Buddhist, do you believe in reincarnation? You can say, well, I do. It makes sense to me because of this, but actually, I don't really know. And it's completely all right for a Buddhist to say, I don't know, or I don't quite get that yet. It's not really clear to me yet. And there's not this necessity to believe in teachings, but the teachings of the Buddha are taken as tools to be used in this education process. So faith, rather in the belief system religions, faith would be like the central pillar, and basically the more faith you have, the better. But in Buddhism, we say faith is like a two-edged sword. You have to be very careful with that. Faith has good points and bad points. The good thing about faith is it focuses your mind. It cuts out a lot of unnecessary stuff. It energizes you. This is the value of faith. But the drawbacks of faith is that it can very easily degenerate into superstition or fanaticism. So the Buddha is saying, develop your faith, but always with wisdom to prevent it sliding into fanaticism or superstition. And the Buddha says, if you ever have the view that I am right and everyone else is wrong, then you've fallen away from the Buddhist path. So it's a very different approach. As regards to knowing what's real, the question is, what are you going to know it with? And this is, the first real sobering insight is your mind is just not developed enough to be able to know what is the truth. You have so many biases and so many, conscious biases, but also unconscious or cognitive biases. If you look up in Wikipedia page, the number of cognitive biases, and there's like over 100 different ones. And our mind, it's like if you want to look at the stars using just a small microscope or a magnifying glass, that your mind doesn't have the power, it doesn't have the stability, the clarity to be able to distinguish in a trustworthy way exactly what is the truth and what is not. So I would say that this desire to know the truth, that's a wonderful thing, but that the first question is, how do you develop your mind in such a way that it is capable of recognizing the truth?
Yes, sir. Just but there's the fact that if you believe in certain religions, right, there is knowing the truth, whether or not we know the truth and can actually find the right way is it's very pretty high stakes. If some religions say if you don't do this and do this correctly, then there could be really harsh very bad consequences at the end. So I just thought is it really okay to if we just don't find out the truth, if a certain truth will have high stake consequences, whether we know it or not.
Yeah, I mean that's always the fear, where you have people who are or any group which is threatening you with bad consequences if you don't do what you're told. But I think that the wisest approach is just to put aside this idea of the truth with a capital T, and just come down to truths with a small t. So we start off as Buddhism. In Buddhism, we're saying, how does it feel when you're selfish? And how does it feel when you're generous? And what is the distinction? And you can observe, can't you? And let's say you help somebody or you do something but you have some desire for something in return, whether it's a material benefit or some praise or a respect. And then when you do something kind and good for somebody and you have no desire at all for anyone even to know that you were the one who did it, was this a bit tong lang prat, as we say in Thai. And you can observe this is something your mind's capable of doing, that there is a difference. And I would say that being generous is superior to being selfish, and being generous without some demand or some expectation is superior to being generous with strings attached. How does it feel living in a family where everyone feels safe and respected and valued, and where people are disrespected or abused? And which we can, I think you can say, I think it's better to live in a family where people love and respect each other, and careful how they relate to each other, how they speak, how they behave, than one in which everybody just goes their own way. So these are small truths that can be learned through experience and through observation, and we can apply that to the world around us and also our inner world. And so I think rather than saying, I want to know the truth and how can I know the truth, that to one side and just know small truths, just very modest, humble baby truths every day, and gradually work up from there.
Thank you very much.
Despite understanding Buddhism and I'm a Buddhist, there's sometimes I fear death itself. And is there any advice you would give it to me?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very different between having an intellectual understanding of something, and having and being able to realize that as a direct experience. In other words, to know that death can come at any moment, and that death comes to everybody, and we don't know how and when death's going to come. So if we look at that in one way, it can make us fearful and anxious. And just thinking about it doesn't really lead anywhere. But when we can calm our mind and with mindfulness, and then you can start to bring this up into life. And of course, as a doctor, I mean, you're being confronted with death all the time. It's just part of your life, and it's a good opportunity to recognize, that it's not a fight against death. Sometimes you hear, oh, so and so lost their battle against cancer. I mean, I always see the most ridiculous kind of idiom. It's this is life. It's like this. We get old, we get sick, we get die, and this just keep coming. Like it's tamada. This is probably the the most useful kind of word to have in Thai. Is it's tamada. That doesn't mean you're just indifferent to it, but you recognize it's not wrong that it's like that. It's just the way things are, always have been, always will be. But that if we reflect upon death in a wise way, then actually it makes us very focused, because we see we just don't have enough time to waste, being angry with people and all this sort of petty stuff that goes on in our life, which we allow to go on, simply because we forget that life is short. So recognizing that life is short and unpredictable means to say, well, let's make the very best use of life. And it can bring a lot of energy to your studies or to your relationships with the people around you, because we're not devas living in deva realm for millions of years. We don't have very long. We don't know how long we have, and from patients that you've met and people, it just suddenly something can just change around in a single day, or through an accident, or through a discovery of cancer or something like this. So life is so fragile and so impermanent, and we have to be able to integrate that into the way that we look at ourselves and our lives, because if we feel fearful of it and we push it away, then it becomes more and more of a problem and more stressful, certainly in your profession, you know, in the medical field, because as I mentioned in this talk, I mean, one of the most important things for a patient is just the manner of the doctor, and if the doctor feels that he's at peace with this himself and he's handling it, then it's just takes such a weight off the patient's mind. But if the doctor himself feels emotionally involved or overly affected and fearful, then that also undermines the healing process, I would say. So it's a really important topic to look into. But it's a matter of just bringing your mind to it again and again. You say, yeah, ธรรมดา เป็นเรื่องธรรมดา
Thank you.
Sorry, hi,ครับ. So I was wondering, what are your thoughts and opinions on when people give advice to other people who are going through like depression or some major mental issues to go to the temple, to เข้าวัด and ทำบุญ to solve their like mental or personal issues? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there are obviously distinctions between chronic depression and short-term depressions. If there are just short-term depression, which has been conditioned by some traumatic life event, whether it's loss of a loved one or loss of a job or divorce or something like that, then you would look at that person and their beliefs and their values. And for many people, that might be one part of a healing process to go to temple and make merit. It's not healing in itself, but it can be one component for people who have some devout faith and already do go to monasteries and find it helpful in their life. Myself, I would start off with talking about eating well, getting out of the house, doing things for other people, and I think that's probably an important one. You're not just sitting there thinking about your own problems all the time, and getting out and doing something, kind actions for other people. And I remember this is like in the early 90s, I went to the States and I went to visit a Cambodian refugee community. It's a big community in Massachusetts. And there were a number of monasteries that had been set up, and the abbot of one of the monasteries was quite well known as a meditation teacher. And so many of these people were severely traumatized and suffering from deep depression in many cases. And so I asked him this kind of question, what kind of meditation do you teach to people who've been through these terrible things with the Khmer Rouge and family members being killed and terrible things? And he said, just get them gardening and helping each other out. He said, meditation's a long way down the road. I mean, meditation is not like the magic bullet for everything, but helping each other, doing something, and you can see something in front of you, that a positive change. Because people who are depressed tend to feel it's hopeless and it's going to be hopeless forever, and I can't do anything, I can't accomplish anything. So you want to be able to show them, yeah, you can do this, you can do at least this. So it might be planting flowers, or it might be helping children in an orphanage, or just doing something which has a very clear short-term positive result, just to get them going again. I think with depression, as you probably know, that the most effective therapy these days is MBCT, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. And so that's a form of therapy which is integrated Buddhist mindfulness practices in order to help people to recognize the particular negative thoughts which have just they've become very identified with in their mind. So yeah, I would say that you have a whole kind of so many different approaches, and you would customize it to the person. So obviously someone's never goes to a monastery, doesn't have much faith in Buddhism, no contact with monks, is not going to suggest that just go and tumble is going to help them. But I think that it can be one part of something that's uplifting to someone who's going through a difficult time.
Thank you, Kap.
สวัสดีค่ะ so my question is that at the very beginning of the humanistic course we were asked to write who am I as an essay, and at that time I thought to myself that why do we have to put ourselves under a box of definitions, and I don't understand why we have to understand ourselves, and what if what we think we are doesn't match with what we really is. But now from listening to your video, and I think that it's a very important thing to know exactly who we are. And if I were to write that essay again, how should I start writing the who am I question?
Yeah, I don't know whether I'd do so well on that question. I mean, I think that it's actually a very profound question, in that in Buddhism we talk about convention and reality. So we have an idea of you have a conventional self that we call me, and that could be summarized maybe in personality traits and weaknesses and strong points and likes and dislikes and all the kind of things that you would put on a profile on social media maybe. But then when we start to look more closely within and learn how to look within without just following the thinking mind, then you find whole areas of yourself and perspectives on yourself that you didn't dream of before. And you don't identify with all these personality traits in the same way. So I'm not sure I could give a who am I? I mean, it depends on, in what sense are you talking? Who am I as a social being? Who am I as an emotional being? Who am I in terms of my values and my ethical ideals? It is a kind of a meaningless word, actually, but one which we have to make use of just to communicate in the world. I think that in the video and what I've been saying here, what I'm really trying to advocate is looking within and trying to understand what goes on inside us. One, for our own mental health, but also because the more you learn about yourself, the more you learn about other people, because the kind of things that are going on in your mind, whether it's desires and fears and anxieties and likes, this is exactly the same thing that goes on in everybody else's mind. There's no difference. It's universal. So if you have like a greedy thought in somebody's mind in ancient India 2,500 years ago, and a greedy thought in somebody's mind in Bangkok today, it's no different. I mean, the thing that might stimulate the greed might be different, but the actual experience of greed is the same. And an experience of kindness in India 2,500 years ago, an experience of kindness today. So we are our own guinea pig, if you like. Psychology, if you really want to understand the human mind and understand happiness and suffering, you have all you need. You just have to look within. And I really believe that the more you do that, then the more empathy that you feel for others, and the better doctor that you'll become also.
กราบนมัสการค่ะ so I want to know your views on euthanasia, and like I know like how in Buddhism we said that the biggest karma that you can do to yourself is to suicide, and like also I want to know your thoughts about euthanasia, and also like how would you advise people who are like doing grief?
Sorry, what was the last one?
Do you have any advice in people like dealing with grieving?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. I'll start off with. Well, what can be seen clearly from the Buddhist Vinaya or discipline of the monks, we have so many rules, and they're in different categories. And the most serious are the 4 what we call parachik or parajika rules, which are expulsion rules. And in the explanation of the third of those rules, which concerns killing, then the Buddha declared that if a monk was to suggest and encourage a woman to have an abortion, and she did, then the monk would be no longer a monk. He would have to leave the monkhood. It would be considered an act of killing for the monk. And secondly, in the case of euthanasia, if that was suggested and promoted and someone was to follow the monk's advice, then also the monk would have committed this most serious offense. So this is a good indication of the Buddhist view on these things. I think that if you put the Buddhist view aside, I think that the worry with euthanasia is the slippery slope. You know, if you start off with saying, well, if somebody is really in extreme pain and they're definitely going to die within a few hours, few days, or whatever, then wouldn't it make sense just to cut off their suffering? And but then you start coming back from that. Well, then how far do you go back to that? Then there've been cases where people have got a diagnosis that they have some terrible disease, and they say, well, I'd just like to die now while I'm still happy and I have a party with my family before all that terrible suffering takes place. So you just the parameters, what would be considered mercy and not mercy is not clear at all. My own fear is for elderly people, because so many elderly people feel that they're a burden on their families and they feel guilty about it. And then if it were made easy to have euthanasia, then many elderly people would maybe go for this just to free up their family. You don't have to spend money on medical care and not so much worry. And so I can see some really serious difficulties and problems and unfortunate things happening, if the euthanasia movement become much more powerful. That's my fear anyway. Strictly from Buddhist doctrinal point of view, I mean, whether it's suicide or euthanasia, it's based upon a belief, and it's not a proven belief. It's you can say it's a superstitious belief, if you like, that the physical death is the end of everything. There's nothing afterwards. And so if you believe that it's just like you turn off a switch and that's the end of everything, then you can see in certain cases why euthanasia or suicide might seem attractive. But it is conditioned on that belief that there's nothing after death. And nobody can be sure about that, can they? And in fact, I would say that the Buddhist monastics are the great scientists of reality, of the inner world, and of causality over long periods. And these greatest of the inner scientists, the Buddha onwards, have told us that it's not the case, that there is a life afterwards, and we have karma, that sometime we have to receive the fruits of our karma. I think that but even if we put aside again the Buddhist doctrinal view, I don't know if you're familiar with the university in South Virginia, where they've been gathering data on children all over the world who can remember past lives, and they're extremely rigorous scientific proof to be accepted into this database. And now they have 2,500 children all over the world, not just in Buddhist or Hindu families, who have very well documented recall of previous lives. So Buddhist hypothesis here would be that those are accurate and they are a proof, not a complete proof, but they are convincing argument in favor of rebirth. And if someone, well, no, people don't say, I don't believe that, then it's not enough really just to say, I reject that. You have to say, well, how do you explain the data? You know, what's your alternative hypothesis? And I think of all the hypotheses to explain the recall of past lives by children, I think rebirth fits the data the best. So this is something, you know, it's worth taking into account, because without this kind of discussion, then suicide under certain circumstances and euthanasia will always seem like an intelligent option to intelligent people sometimes. And I don't think it is at all from my view. So was there another part of the question I didn't?
Thank you for your answer. And my second question is that your advice on people who are like grieving. Grieving,
yeah. Well, grieving is just natural part of life, isn't it? You know, it's like the price you pay for loving someone. You know, if you want to have any grief, then don't love anybody. But who wants to do that? So the more you love someone, the more that you'll grieve when you are separated from them. And I would compare it to like a wound. As you have a wound, and then over the course of time, that wound heals up. But your job is to prevent it becoming infected while it's still open. And you have to keep that wound clean. So the two ways that wounds become unclean in this analogy is, one, if you're just going over and over and over things from the past and unable to let that person go, and particularly with regrets and guilt and et cetera, then that holding on to somebody keeps the wound open and can infect the wound. The other extreme is to try just to sort of keep busy and just keep it out of your mind and don't think about that person and just do something else and just to repress it. But I don't think that also is a very wise strategy. So the middle way here would be that you recognize, yes, I'm grieving. This is how my life is right now. And when there are thoughts of the loved one appear in the mind or the person who's passed away, you recognize this is a memory. Right now, this is a memory. And if you have an image or a vision of that person, you say, may you be well, may you be well. So every time you think of that person, you don't grasp onto the thought and you don't push it away, you just hold it. And you say, oh yeah, this is a memory of this loved one, and may you be well. And so you gradually, you can't expect grief to go away. And if it's a important person in your life, then probably at least a year before you start to feel back to normal. You have these waves come, you know, it's like the first birthday, the first this, the first that, you know, first year is tough for everyone, I think. But then gradually, then as I say, if you keep the wound clean, it'll heal by itself.
จากการอาจารย์อีกทีนะครับผม so I think we can all agree that Buddhism, not as a religion but as a philosophical practice, right? It's a very logical, almost scientific way of thinking, and you know, the more mature I become, the older I grow, the more I appreciate the practice of Buddhism as a philosophy. But one thing that still stumps me until today, and this is one thing that I've always been curious about ever since I was a child, is the practice of สวดมนต์นะครับอาจารย์. Because the thing is, and I'm curious because ever since I was a child, we were taught it. I'm sure a lot of my friends too, we were taught to Suat Mon, and so it just repeated almost mindlessly and not really understanding what it's all about. So I'm just asking for an advice from you on how I can appreciate better the whole practice of Suat Mon, Suat Mon, including the ones you can do at home and the ones where you go to, religious events and you have Suat Monอะไรอย่างเงี้ยครับอาจารย์ so just asking for some advice ครับ
as a practice, I think that to begin with, for lay Buddhists, if you're going to put aside a certain amount of time for meditation every day, you have a real problem that when you come into the room, you're not in a very meditative state of mind usually. You've got a lot of stuff going on in your head from what you've been doing during the day, and there are one or two practices. Chanting is a good one. It's just a transitional practice, just to slow you down and bring you back to sort of basic principles of the teaching. So it's coarser than sitting with your eyes closed. It's something you're doing, but then can take you into a more meditative space. So that's one psychological benefit. In groups, I use this a lot. Like I give, until COVID at least, I would give these Sunday morning talks where 200 or 300 people come, and they come from all over the place. And to have people come from all over, from Bangkok, from Bak Chong, from different parts of the country, and sit and chant together for 20, 30 minutes, it's a very effective and efficient socializing technique. Because by harmonizing your posture, your hands, your voice, it's just a way of just creating a sense of unity and harmony in a group in a very short period of time. So I think that's a very good. With the chanting itself, I mean, these days with Google and so on, it takes a very short time to look up a Pali chant and find out what the meaning of it is. So there's really no excuse for saying, I don't know what all that means. Well, only because you can't be bothered to look it up, basically. It's right there and very easily accessible. A lot of a number of the chants are more sort of doctrinal, and those are the ones that are, really lend themselves to translation. And it can be like a short, daily recap of the sort of main principles of the philosophy, if you like, or the teachings. And if you learn them by heart, then something else happens. Sometimes in daily life, something happens, and then suddenly the relevant phrase from the chant just pops up into your head. It's quite a wonderful thing, But it's not just an intellectual exercise, it's an emotional exercise. And if you have that kind of base of faith and inspiration and interest, that the chanting can just bring up a lot of joy. And I think that's why a lot of people like it. It's very joyful for people to do it. But again, it's, if you're just sitting and reading it and so on, you don't have that real sense of commitment to it. It can be really sort of boring and it's a waste of time, but there is a lot to be had from it. And as I say, if you're chanting it, and if you're on a meditation retreat or something where everybody's really working hard and it's just you can get a really good feeling going in the chanting. So it has both a cognitive and an affective benefit, and different benefits from chanting alone or chanting in a group. I think in chanting alone, it depends on the character. Some people just love it and they find they can get more peaceful chanting than they can meditating, and they tend to chant a lot more. I would generally recommend people just to choose chants that you like and you find inspiring, and just chant one or two just as a way of settling down before you begin to meditate.
My question is, I was looking at, I don't know how much I can trust Wikipedia, but it says that on there that you have aphantasia. I was wondering, like how do you like deal with it, or how do you tell people like in order to like visualize images, or like for people who can't really see the images in their mind and things like that?
That's on a Wikipedia page, is it?
Yeah, it's on a Wikipedia page, so I wasn't sure if it's true or not, but
Yeah,
it
it's
linked
true.
me to like another YouTube channel, a YouTube video.
Yeah, I mean, I discovered this. Well, I discovered the condition when I started meditating and speaking with other meditators, but I didn't know there was such a thing, a condition that many people around the world had it until a few years ago, when it became a bit of a news item, and the guy with runs Firefox browser wrote an article about it, and even people in the animation studio, in California with this, the president of I can't remember the name of the animators. Yeah, so personally, it's definitely a problem for me in teaching visualization, and it is one of the reasons why I found myself in McLeod Ganj in the Himalayas with the Tibetan Buddhists and Dalai Lama at the age of 18, and one of the main reasons why I decided not to follow path of Tibetan Buddhism, because I couldn't do all the visualizations. It's just so normal to me that it's like with many people with aphantasia, then kind of always assume that when people talk about visualizing this, they were just talking like figuratively, it's just like a figure of speech. But that people could actually see things in their mind, and color is just unimaginable to me. I think there are compensations. I mean, I'm very sensitive to language, always loved language and words. But yeah, I'm very bad at remembering directions. I get lost very easy. Tudong's difficult for me. Walking in the forest or even in cities, I find difficult to remember faces and people, which in my position where I'm center of a lot of attention is very difficult. But it's just part, it's like everyone has something or other, and you just have to deal with it. I mean, all in all, I'm quite happy with it. You can imagine as a young monk, if you're living celibate life, and many monks end up leaving to get married, and I never had any problem with, I don't have any kind of pornographic images in my head ever. So as a young monk, I was just a great blessing, and so, anything I think, is like pros and cons, advantages, disadvantages. And do you have this as yourself, or is it that?
No, I don't, but
Okay.
I was just wondering how it went about. And have you ever like met someone who really can't hear the thoughts? Because it's like when you experience metacognition, it's like you need to be able to speak to yourself in your mind too.
No, because after I found out about aphantasia, I read about some of the other kind of similar associated kind of disorders, and I read about that. No, I've never met anybody personally with that, but it's a fascinating topic, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. So thank you so much for this.
You're welcome.
กับสวัสดีพระอาจารย์ครับ I'm wondering what do you think is the most important doctrine or หลักธรรมคำสอน in Buddhism, and how can we apply it to our roles as either as a medical student or as an aspiring physician?
Wow, that's a big question. I guess probably the Four Noble Truths, because the Buddha himself said that just as all of the footsteps, the footprints of all the animals in the jungle will fit within the footprint of the elephant, and all the teachings of the Buddha fit within the Four Noble Truths. So the Four Noble Truths can be very simply rendered as recognition, assessment of the problem, and then the determination of the causes and conditions of the problem, and determining the best possible outcome of removing that problem, and then the path of practice leading to that. So it's very, very similar to a medical analysis, isn't it? What's the condition? What's the cause of the condition? What cure can be hoped for or worked towards, and what is the path that needs to be taken? So in that case, I would say there's a very clear analogy between those two approaches. Generally, the path of practice in Buddhism, just to give one more teaching, we call the threefold training or threefold education. So that's the education, firstly, of your actions, your behavior, your conduct, and your speech. Secondly, the education of your emotions, negative and positive emotions, learning how to abandon and cultivate. And thirdly, the wisdom faculty, development of wisdom and understanding. So these three main aspects of Buddhist practice need to be carried on in harmony together. So cultivating wise action and speech, learning your inner world of thought and emotion, and learning how to govern that well, and then learning how to develop a sharper, clearer understanding of the way things are.
Thank you very much,ครับ
Thank you so much. I would like to invite Ajahn Palmer to close this event. Thank you so much for the wisdom and the time and your metta ค่ะ อาจารย์Palmer
ครับขอบพระคุณพระอาจารย์มากครับที่เมตตาพวกเรานะครับ and for our students I think you can see that the medicine is quite a lot to learn, but actually in ourselves we inside our mind we can have many things to learn too. I think in for next things that we can do, you can go back and to learn any things that happen in learning medicine. You can learn from them, good or bad, and I think I am sure that you can grow up. And so everyone, let's say sadhu to our Ajahn.
สาธุค่ะสาธุค่ะอาจารย์ค่ะอาจารย์สมศักดิ์ไม่มีขอบคุณอาจารย์ที่เชิญอาจารย์มานะคะ
สาธุพระอาจารย์ครับ
ภาษาไทยด้วยค่ะ
โอเคครับก็ขอบคุณในความเมตตาของพระอาจารย์ครับที่มีต่อพวกเราครับแล้วก็ผมคิดว่าชั่วโมงนี้เนี่ยเป็นชั่วโมงที่จริงๆแล้วต้องบอกความในใจว่าในเรื่องของศาสนาเนี่ยหรือว่าสิ่งที่เราอาจจะมองเห็นรูปแบบในวันนี้เนี่ยอาจจะไม่ได้เป็นสิ่งที่เราเป็นเป้าหมายในการที่จะให้ความรู้กับพวกเราในวันนี้แต่ผมว่าสิ่งสำคัญมันคงเป็นเพียงแค่รูปแบบแต่ว่าเนื้อหาจริงๆเนี่ยมันคือเรื่องของปรัชญาการดำรงชีวิตของคนในการที่จะมีการสัมผัสในสิ่งนี้ร่วมกันได้ทางใจเป็นนามธรรมไม่สามารถวัดได้โดยการมองเห็นด้วยตาไม่สามารถวัดด้วยการได้ยิน intensity ว่าสูงขึ้นเท่าไหร่หรืออะไรต่างๆพวกนั้นความแม่นยำคงจะเป็นเรื่องที่บอกยากคงจะมีมุมมองที่แตกต่างกันหลายอย่างเป็นเรื่องที่อาจารย์ทุกท่านกังวลมากที่สุดเรื่องหนึ่ง ในเรื่องของ Humanistic ที่จะสื่อสารกันด้วยภาษายากยิ่งกว่าวิชาการทางการแพทย์ซึ่งมีคำอธิบายต่างๆที่ชัดเจนผมคิดว่าวันนี้เราได้พบกับผู้ที่มีความรู้เชี่ยวชาญทางด้านของ Humanistic ใช้ชีวิตอยู่กับสิ่งต่างเหล่านี้มากว่า40 ปีในการที่จะดูแลคนรอบข้างดูแลตัวเองแล้วก็มาแชร์ประสบการณ์แล้วก็ตอบคำถามต่างๆให้กับพวกเราได้น่าจะลึกซึ้งแล้วคิดว่าคงเป็นประโยชน์กับทุกๆคนขอบคุณอาจารย์พลเลิศนะครับอาจารย์เอ็มนะฮะก็ขอบคุณนักเรียนนิสิตที่ให้ความสนใจพัฒนาตัวเองตรงนี้แล้วก็กราบขอบพระคุณพระอาจารย์อีกครั้งหนึ่งที่เมตตาพวกเรานะครับ